Few minutes, the case of Tony Taylor. He's interned by license. He was arrested last year, just about a year ago, released. There was no charges. He had been released from prison as a Republican a number of years before, and suddenly last March, he was arrested again. No one knows why. They won't tell him what the charges are. He and his lawyer, Eireann Carlin also represents Jerry McGill. He's worked on a lot of Republican cases. He's a great lawyer in Ireland, or a solicitor. They ask why, and the procedure is they can't be told. There will be a hearing at some point, a secret hearing, and they're not allowed to hear the evidence because that would be breach national security of the British government. And then we're going to have on Sean Bresnahan. He is going to talk about Brexit, what it's going to mean, how it's now been triggered. He is going to talk as a member of the 1916 societies about what they're doing, and he'll talk about a hunger strike demonstration commemoration last year.
But this thing that's going on with Tony Taylor and hanging over Jerry McGill, even though you're out of prison, they're telling you for the rest of your life, if you associate with Irish Republicans, go to events, we can take back the license and put you in jail. And that's what's going on with Tony Taylor, is it?
With Tony Taylor, he was a community activist. He's with a legal group, Republican Network for Unity. He was one of the people you'd go to if you were harassed by the British Constabulary, the PSNI. If you had problems with housing, you had other political problems, you would go to him. He was a respected leader in the community. He's got a family, he's married, and boom, all of a sudden he gets arrested. No one knows why. Okay, and we have somebody on the phone. Is that correct? Michael Doherty. Michael, welcome to Radio Free Eireann.
Thanks, Martin. Thank you very much.
Michael, you're on the committee. We've just introduced it, the story of Tony Taylor, why you think it's internment by license. I just want to read something from today's Irish News. The headline of the story, Priest Joins Call for Release of Derry Republican Prisoner. And it's a priest, Father Patrick O'Kane, who called for Tony Taylor's release, the latest. And he says, the case boils down to this. They should either charge him or release him. The fact is, however, they are no rush to do so and seem quite happy to simply sit on their hands and keep Tony locked up. That is where the injustice lies. Michael, could you tell us about Tony Taylor, about why he's in prison, why he doesn't get a hearing that his own lawyer can attend and defend him and try and show his innocence?
Yeah, well, Tony was released from prison in 2014, and they released him under a system called license, which means that if you pose a risk to the public or reoffend, you can be brought back to prison to then stay out the remainder of your sentence, okay? Now, what happened with Tony was that he was released. He abided by the terms of his license. He continued to peacefully agitate on issues regarding prisoners' rights, the welfare cuts that were happening to the poor in the society, and he became an important member of the community for those issues. While remaining Republican and opposed to the political regime here. And what happened was that in March of this year, while Tony was out shopping with his wife and 3 kids, he was surrounded by armed police, arrested, and returned to prison. Now, what they said then was that Tony was returned to prison and his license was revoked because he posed a risk to public safety. And that's all they said.
All right, how does he contest that? How would he and his lawyer, Eireann Carlin, be prepared to contest that? And I understand there is some kind of hearing, but that neither Tony Taylor or his solicitor can attend that hearing and be told exactly what the accusations are against him. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, before we even do that, you need to go a little bit further back in that in October of last year, Tony was arrested and taken to a police station in Belfast. He was questioned for 2 days over alleged Republican activity. and the police unconditionally released them. But they sent a file to the legal authority here, the Public Prosecution Service, to see whether charges should be brought. Okay? So Tony was released, and he was quite happy, and then he was, again, taken back into prison. Now, while he's been in prison since, the Public Prosecution Service have stated that on this evidence, or the lack of it that was produced, Tony has no case to answer. So the next part of the process now is that the British Attorney General will appoint an advocate who will take up Tony's case. Tony isn't allowed to appoint this advocate, nor is his solicitor. It is done by the British system. This advocate then will meet Tony and his solicitor and discuss Tony's concerns with him and Tony's incarceration with him. Then this advocate goes to a private meeting with the parole commissioners at which the evidence, or so-called evidence, will be produced. But this is all in private, in secret.
And the advocate, Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, the advocate is not allowed to tell Tony or his solicitor exactly what the specific charges are. So, for example, let's say I'm going to go to Derry in a couple of weeks. Suppose I was charged with something that happened today, if I had a license, that happened today at this particular time, whatever it is, 6 o'clock in Derry. If I knew about the accusation, I could say, wait a second. I was on the radio. John McDonough was with me at all times. Michael Doherty was on the radio on the other end. There is a tape, will be a transcript on rfe123.org. I have an absolute alibi. But if you don't tell me what it is precisely, what the time frame is, what actions I'm doing, I have no way to tell an advocate. An advocate has no way to present that. The advocate's not allowed to tell me what the precise charge is because that somehow would endanger the safety of the security of the British government. Isn't that how it works?
That's exactly the case. I mean, how can you defend yourself against charges when you don't know what they are, when they're supposed to have taken place? As you say, you would automatically, if you have an alibi for any accusation, then you don't know that you actually even have it because you don't know when it's supposed to have taken place.
All right. And, Michael, another thing that I want to bring out, Tony Taylor is supported by all of the Nationalist politicians. He's been supported by Eamon McCann, who is now an MLA with People Before Profit. He's been supported by Ann McCloskey, who was an unsuccessful candidate. He's been supported even, as well as Priest, as I've mentioned, by the SDLP and even by Martin McGuinness. But that doesn't seem to matter at all. Tony Taylor is still in. They keep saying they need agreements from everybody, from the whole community, to investigate legacy cases or to release funding for inquests, but they don't seem to need one when a British secretary wants to imprison Tony Taylor.
Well, you see, this is the problem with the whole system in itself, and that I can't remember how many years ago, policing and justice were supposedly devolved to the administration in Belfast, which included the SDLP, Sinn Féin, and now Eamon McCann being there and Stormont as well. But in this matter, they have claimed it's what's called a reserved matter regarding national security. So therefore, the decision was made by the Secretary of State. Her initial decision to imprison Tony was found 3 weeks later to be illegal because they hadn't even followed their own flawed process. The Secretary of State was supposed to talk to the probation service to find out if Tony had broken any of the conditions of his probation, and they didn't even do that. So the first 3 weeks of Tony's incarceration, they have now admitted were completely illegal. But of course, in the meantime, they have now retrogradely gone back and sorted that out. But for the meantime, Tony is still inside, and Stormont is effectively powerless in it. This is coming from London.
All right, we have one Teresa Villiers that I usually refer to as the Lady Macbeth because she starts to, just like Lady Macbeth, rubbing her hands to wash away the bloodstains. Teresa Villiers used to do that with speeches. She's the original secretary now who imprisoned him. That's been taken up and adopted by James Brookenshier, the person who the Ballymurphy massacre families walked out on last week, who was recently telling American politicians how open he is and a new day has dawned and there is justice. But still, he continues and maintains the internment by license of Tony Taylor. And Michael, could you...
Well, the difficulty with James Brokenshire, sorry for interrupting there, is that if you look back on his own political history, the people who are making the accusations against Tony Taylor are the secretive MI5 security services. And if you look back in James Brokenshire's history, he is from them. He was a member of MI5, or at least an associate of them for many years. So that he has that background.
All right.
So it's a continuation of Villiers' regime.
Right, and
I can't see how he can speak about openness and resolving issues of the past when there's a current issue which he could resolve immediately at the stroke of a pen, or at least, if he's not willing to do that and release the man immediately, at least bring him to court and get the evidence out there, whereas supposedly a Western democracy, they would believe in natural justice.
All right. It seems that Tony Taylor is being used as a pawn, as a sword of Damocles over the head of anybody else. There are many people who are former Republican prisoners who may owe license or time, who were released under either the Good Friday deal or other sentences, and have to know that they could be the next Tony Taylor if they become too active in the community. If they start to be of concern to the British government, they can simply be put in, and that would be it. And Tony Taylor, he owes a total of 4 years if they want to keep him there that long. He's a man with a family, a wife. I know one of his children is handicapped, and this is a situation which continues to go on, despite the fact that so many nationalist politicians, clergy, have supported him. All right, Michael, we want to thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Yeah.
We've got to close off just in a minute. Is there any final words you want to say?
Well, I would just like to say that exactly that point, that it is the fear that if they can do this to Tony Taylor, do this to anyone in license, then it's the next step to do this with anybody. So it's a natural justice issue for everybody, not just one small group.
All right. We want to thank you, Michael Doherty, for coming on talking about Tony Taylor. And I hope to see you in a couple of weeks when I'm in Derry at the Playhouse at the Brendan Hughes lecture.
We will be there as well. We will have a stall there, and we'll look forward to seeing you there.
Great.
And Martin, you're